Get ready to have your minds blown because today we're taking a deep dive into something pretty wild. Like, what if cooking was as easy as just thinking about what you wanted to eat?
No stoves, no pots or pans, just pure mental culinary power.
That sounds like science fiction, right?
It does. And we'll be exploring this mind-boggling concept based on an article we found called Historical Speculation, a world where people can cook by thinking.
We're not just talking about, like, mentally whipping up a quick snack.
Right.
This deep dive is going to take us through the political, the social, the economic,
The technological, the cultural.
impacts of what would happen if our kitchens basically became, like, mind-reading wonderlands.
It really makes you rethink everything.
It does. So get ready to have all your assumptions challenged because this article is making some pretty bold claims.
Mental cooking could change everything.
It really could. But before we go any further, I think we should probably, like, define what we're actually talking about here.
Yeah, what exactly is mental cooking in this context? So the article is imagining a future where technology has advanced to the point where our thoughts can directly interact with matter.
Okay, so no, like, snapping your fingers and magically conjuring up a pizza out of thin air.
No, definitely not.
We're talking about, like, real physical ingredients.
Transforming raw ingredients into cooked meals.
Okay, that makes more sense. But then, like, where does the whole mental part come in?
Well, it's the thought that triggers the transformation, so you'd still need access to ingredients.
That's where the political implications get really interesting.
Exactly. So the article argues that in this world, governments would shift their focus
Instead of distributing meals.
to distributing the raw ingredients.
So instead of worrying about, like, food stamps or meal programs,
We might be talking about ingredient vouchers.
wow, making sure that everyone has the basic building blocks to create a healthy diet.
Exactly.
That's a complete, like, overhaul of how we think about social programs.
It really is. But it raises a lot of questions, too.
Yeah, like, logistically, how would that even work? How do you guarantee the quality and the safety of ingredients?
Especially on such a massive scale.
Exactly.
These are key points that the article brings up.
It suggests a huge increase in the importance of things like agricultural policies.
Definitely. And regulations.
Mhm.
Imagine these debates about prioritizing organic farming or locally sourced produce,
And how to make sure that everybody has access to high-quality ingredients.
and all while ensuring equitable distribution.
Across different regions, different socioeconomic groups.
All those factors.
I mean, and let's not even get started on the impact on global trade.
Right?
Like, would countries with abundant natural resources suddenly become these, like, culinary superpowers?
Would we see a surge in demand for rare or exotic ingredients from specific regions?
Creating, like, new economic winners and losers.
Exactly. The potential for economic disruption is huge.
Yeah.
The article predicts a massive shift away from things like processed foods.
What about the restaurant industry?
Yeah, the restaurant industry would see huge changes. The article suggests that we would shift towards this booming market for raw, high-quality ingredients.
Okay, so that makes sense. But, you know, I'm not exactly a master chef in this world.
Right.
Would everyone suddenly become a culinary genius just because they can now cook with their minds?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. The article talks about the concept of skill and creativity.
Okay.
So it argues that while the technical aspects of cooking, like chopping vegetables or mastering the perfect sear on a steak, might become obsolete,
Right.
the real skill would lie in the ability to imagine and conceptualize these unique flavor combinations.
Oh. So instead of learning, like, knife skills.
You'd be learning how to translate your culinary imagination into, like, a taste reality.
Learning to cook all over again, but with your mind as the main tool.
Exactly. And that has all sorts of interesting implications.
Like what?
Well, think about the social side of cooking. Imagine dinner parties. But instead of focusing on the host's culinary prowess, it becomes about the creativity and originality of the dishes that they've, like, mentally prepared.
Oh, that's kind of cool. Would there be, like, a whole new set of social anxieties around mental cooking?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, what if I accidentally, I don't know, burn my mental roast or my mental souffle falls flat?
It's fascinating to think about how these social dynamics would play out. Would we see new forms of culinary critique emerge?
Oh, I could totally see that. People judging each other not just on the taste of their food, but also on, like, the originality, the complexity of their mental recipes.
Absolutely.
But I have a question. Like, how would this even work on a practical level?
What do you mean?
Well, how would we actually experience the taste? Would we be able to, like, taste the food in our minds before it materializes.
That's where the article gets into the technology piece.
Okay.
So it speculates about these advanced brain-computer interfaces that could not only translate our thoughts into culinary instructions, but also provide sensory feedback,
Whoa.
allowing us to actually experience the flavors and the textures.
So you could mentally sample your creation before it even exists in the physical world.
Exactly.
That's incredible. But wouldn't that require, like, an incredibly sophisticated understanding of how the brain processes taste and all that sensory information?
Absolutely. The article talks about the potential for huge breakthroughs in neuroscience and sensory technology.
Good.
And it suggests that the research required to make mental cooking a reality could actually lead to all sorts of advancements in other fields as well.
Like what?
Well, think about medicine or even virtual reality.
It's like this one concept has the potential to unlock a whole new realm of possibilities.
It really does.
But okay, before we get too carried away with all the excitement, let's play devil's advocate for a second.
Okay.
What about the environmental impact?
Yes, the sustainability question.
Right.
So the article emphasizes that even in a world of mental cooking, sustainability would still be absolutely crucial.
So even if we're not, like, using gas stoves or electric ovens anymore,
Right. We still have to think about where our food comes from.
the way we farm, process, and transport those ingredients.
It all still has a major impact on the planet.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the article argues that the shift to mental cooking would have to happen alongside a parallel shift towards more sustainable food systems,
We'd have to be really mindful about things like reducing food waste
promoting regenerative agriculture,
and making sure that everyone has access to nutritious ingredients.
regardless of their location or their economic status.
It's a good reminder that technological innovation on its own isn't enough.
No, it's not. We have to address those systemic issues within our current food systems.
To make sure that a future with mental cooking is actually beneficial for everyone and for the planet.
Right. It's not a magic bullet solution.
I feel like we've already covered so much ground, but we're really just scratching the surface here.
We've only just begun to explore the potential impacts of mental cooking.
And it's clear that this seemingly simple concept
Right.
could completely transform the world as we know it.
It's a fascinating glimpse into a future where food and technology and our own minds all intertwine in ways that we can barely imagine.
And we've got even more to discuss. In our next segment, we'll dive even deeper into the individual experiences.
And those cultural shifts that mental cooking could bring about.
So stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into a world where you can just think about food and boom, it's cooked.
Last time we were talking about, like, all the big political and economic changes that mental cooking could cause, like ingredient vouchers instead of food stamps.
Yeah, huge shifts.
But this time, let's zoom in a bit.
Yeah.
How would this impact our daily lives beyond just not having to go to the grocery store?
Well, the article talks about how mental cooking could actually make us way more mindful about the food we eat.
More mindful.
Yeah. Think about it. You're not distracted by all the chopping and stirring and all that stuff. You're free to really focus on the flavors, how the food feels in your mouth.
So you're saying, like, mental cooking could actually lead to a more enjoyable eating experience?
Exactly. You could really savor every bite.
Huh. I never thought of it like that.
Instead of multitasking while you cook, you're fully present in the moment of creating and enjoying your meal.
It sounds kind of relaxing, actually.
Almost meditative.
But what about, the social part of cooking?
Like cooking with friends or family dinners.
Yeah, would we still gather for meals if there's no need to actually, like, cook together?
That's a good question. The article suggests that mental cooking could actually enhance social interaction around food.
Enhance it.
How?
Imagine you're at a dinner party, right?
Okay.
Everyone's mentally preparing a dish, but as they're doing it, they're sharing their thought processes.
Ooh, interesting. So it becomes less about showing off your skills with a knife
Right.
and more about sharing your creativity, your unique taste. Exactly. It's like a collaborative art project, but with food.
Yeah.
And think about how much easier it would be to experience all those different cultures and cuisines.
Oh, yeah. You could, like, mentally travel to any country.
And try authentic dishes without needing special ingredients or equipment.
That's amazing. It's like a culinary vacation, but without ever leaving your dining room.
Exactly.
But wouldn't that also bring up some issues? Like, what about cultural appropriation?
That's a good point. If anyone can mentally cook any dish from any culture, how do we make sure those traditions are respected?
And not just, like, copied without any understanding.
Right, and the article does acknowledge that. It says we need to be thoughtful about engaging with different cultures.
Yeah, it's got to be done with respect.
Mental cooking could be a great way to learn about different cultures, but only if it's done the right way.
It's like the difference between just copying a recipe from a cookbook.
And really understanding the history and the cultural significance behind a dish.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's talk about, like, chefs.
Professional chefs.
Yeah. What happens to them in a world where anyone can just mentally cook a gourmet meal?
That's a big one, right? Would we all become amazing cooks overnight?
Or would there still be a place for those who have, like, spent years honing their craft?
The article suggests that the role of a chef would probably change.
How so?
Instead of just focusing on those technical skills, chefs might become more like culinary mentors or flavor architects.
Flavor architects, I like that. So instead of teaching someone how to, like, julienne vegetables.
They'd be teaching them how to mentally construct a perfect balance of flavors and textures.
Whoa.
They could specialize in creating complex mental recipes,
Or like sensory experiences that we can't even imagine right now.
pushing the boundaries of what's possible with mental cooking.
It's like the culinary world would become this crazy blend of technology, art, and personal expression.
Exactly. It's pretty exciting to think about.
But what about learning to mentally cook?
Like, would we be able to do it right away?
Or would it take time and practice?
Well, the article doesn't get too specific about the learning process, but it does suggest that we might have personalized culinary training programs.
Oh, interesting.
Like AI systems that analyze your taste preferences.
And then create a custom learning plan for you.
Exactly. It's like having a personalized culinary coach in your mind.
That's wild.
Right.
But wouldn't that also create, like, a digital divide?
Yeah, what about people who don't have access to all this fancy technology?
Right. It wouldn't be fair if only some people got to enjoy the benefits of mental cooking.
You're absolutely right. The article stresses the importance of making sure everyone has equal access to this technology.
To the training programs, to the resources,
It's all about making sure this technology benefits everyone.
not just making existing inequalities even worse.
Exactly. Okay, but even with all these amazing possibilities and the challenges, there's one question that keeps popping into my head.
What's that?
What happens to the simple joy of cooking?
You mean like the hands-on experience?
Yeah, the feeling of creating something with your own two hands.
I see what you mean. Would mental cooking, like, take away some of that pleasure?
It's a good question, and the article doesn't really address it directly.
Would it become too easy? Too automated?
And lose some of that magic that comes with traditional cooking.
Maybe. But then again, humans are incredibly adaptable.
Right.
If mental cooking does become a thing, I bet people will find ways to still enjoy those aspects they love about traditional cooking.
Maybe we'll see a resurgence of, like, artisanal ingredient production.
Or a renewed appreciation for the art of growing your own food.
It's hard to say for sure, but I think it's exciting to imagine all the different ways this could unfold.
Maybe mental cooking wouldn't replace traditional cooking altogether.
Maybe it would just change it in ways we can't even predict.
It's all about, like, evolution, right? Both in the kitchen and in how we think about food.
And that leads to some even deeper questions about creativity, about skill, about consciousness itself.
Ooh, now you're really getting me intrigued. Sounds like we're about to head into some pretty philosophical territory.
We are. And I can't wait to explore those ideas with you in our next and final segment.
All right, so we've talked about how mental cooking could change society, how it could change our relationship with food, but now we're getting into, like, the really deep stuff.
The philosophical side of things.
Yeah. The article hinted at mental cooking, like blurring the lines between the physical and the mental, but I'm not really sure what that means.
Okay, well, imagine a world where creating something, anything, is purely mental.
Okay.
You're not using tools or ingredients. You're just shaping matter with your thoughts.
So it's like the ultimate form of imagination, where your mind is the kitchen.
Exactly.
But wouldn't that change how we think about skill?
In what way?
Well, if anyone can just mentally cook anything, does skill even matter anymore?
That's a question the article really grapples with. It suggests that mental cooking would shift our focus away from technical skills.
Like knowing how to chop or saute.
Exactly. And instead we'd focus on the ability to come up with unique culinary ideas.
Oh, interesting.
So the skill is in the originality, the complexity, the artistry of the mental recipe itself.
So it's less about being a really good cook and more about being like a culinary visionary.
Exactly. Like the difference between a skilled painter and a truly creative artist.
Okay, that makes sense. But this idea that thoughts can influence matter, even if it's just for cooking, that's pretty profound.
It really is. The article talks about this old philosophical idea called mind-body dualism.
Mind, body, what?
Dualism. It's basically about the relationship between our minds and the physical world.
Okay.
And mental cooking, if it were real, would totally challenge that.
Like proof that our thoughts have power. If we can make food just by thinking about it, what else could we do?
Right. It makes you wonder about the nature of reality itself.
Okay, so big picture stuff, but what about on a more personal level? Like, how would this affect our relationship with food?
The article suggests that mental cooking could make us way more connected to what we eat.
How so?
If we're creating every single detail of our meal with our minds, we'd be so much more aware of the flavors, the textures, the nutrition.
That's like, we actually have to think about what we're putting in our bodies.
And it could make us more appreciative of the food we eat.
Yeah, I can see that. And wouldn't it change how we share meals with others?
Absolutely. Imagine sharing a meal and it's like you're literally sharing your thoughts and creative energy.
Ooh, cool. Food for thought, literally.
But it also raises some concerns.
Like what?
Well, if our thoughts can be turned into food, what's to stop them from being, like, manipulated or stolen?
Oh, that's a good point. Like, could someone hack into my mind and steal my secret recipe for, I don't know, the best menthol chocolate chip cookies?
Well, the article does emphasize the need for, like, really strong privacy protections.
Yeah, we need some serious safeguards in place.
We'd have to be really careful about how this technology is developed and used.
It's like any powerful technology. It could be used for good or for bad.
Exactly. It's all about being aware of the risks and proceeding thoughtfully.
This whole conversation has been so fascinating.
I know, right? It's amazing to think about how food could be so much more than just something we eat.
It's a reflection of our culture, our creativity, our imagination.
And who knows, maybe someday the only ingredient we'll need to make an incredible meal will be our own thoughts.
Well, that's a delicious thought to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We hope you've enjoyed exploring the world of mental cooking with us.